What Young Pharaoh was canceled for was telling the truth about white supremacy. He was basically, and he didn't do it tactfully, okay? But the one area where this dude told the truth, and not the one. I mean, he said the truth about other things, but I mean, I'll get to some of his BS and why it made them look suspect to even have him. And then for the reason that they canceled him, he was basically saying that Judaism is a lie, and they have this Judeo-Christian thing with the right wing, like people like Dennis Prager, he's Jewish. Ben Shapiro, like you got a bunch of right wing Jews, and they fall into that. You can't question Zionism, which is white supremacy by proxy, and a lot of them aren't really religious, so it don't really matter so much if you say, well, look, man, you really believe the Moses story? You know, Shlomo Sands is spilling it on the Roman expulsion. You don't really have a lot with that. I can go into population genetics and show that Europeans, that Ashkenazi are super European. So when you say that it's based on a lie, Judaism is based on a lie, and they're thieving, it's a black liberation / Hotep style of just saying that Zionism is bad. I mean, that's basically what Young Pharaoh was saying, and that's one of the few things where he's correct. I mean, because this is a dude, like, if you look at his scamming or you look at his top 10, let me go through his top 10. There's something about Katy Perry that reminds me a little bit of what Young Pharaoh is going through with CPAC. And it's one of her songs specifically, and I played it at the end of one of my videos once, just, I figure I'm not going to get like a copyright claim for playing a quick clip at the end of a video. And the song was a metal version of Teenage Dream. I'm not a big pop person. Like pop music, most genres of music, period, pretty much all genres of music, I think 90% of what's out there in the genre or more, I can't really listen to. It's meh music. Like if I get a video game, like I had The Last Madden, and I'm like, The Last Madden had the worst soundtrack I've ever heard on a sports game. Like there was one half decent song by this Butch rapper. God, I kind of forget her name. Yeah. She's kind of a little cute Butch chick. Like, and that's the thing. A lot of brothers, people want to put an affinity for liking, for being like Malik Yoba and being into transsexual chicks, but really most of us, like if we're unusually attracted to anything, we kind of like to tame the studs. I'll admit it, especially because a lot of them studs are just bad girls dressed up like boys. So we kind of like the studs. So they kind of had this one little cute stud rapper who had that song. I think it's called "Win Again." That's like the only song I like in The Last Man, and it's like that with pop. I don't really like pop, but a couple Katy Perry songs I really like, and there's some other decent ones. But the two I like the most are Teenage Dream and Friday. But when I'm listening to Teenage Dream and it's growing on me, I'm like, oh, it's so catchy. This sounds good. The thing that stood out is it always comes off as a metal song that was made girlish. Because, like Teenage Dream is then that's the melody of Teenage Dream. And then you make it metal and it's like it's, to me, when I was hearing Teenage Dream, I'm like, this is a metal song that she kind of chilled out. And the song just always at the heart came off as metal. And like, to me, metal is like any other music genre. Most of it is ass. But I was like, man, if you were to make a metal song out of this, so I'm like, I bet you somebody covered in metal. I searched YouTube, and right away at the very top is this one band. I keep forgetting their name. It's like Vampires Everywhere. I think that's what it's called. And they got a Katy Perry Teenage Dream metal song that sounds exactly like what I predicted. And that kind of reminds me of Young Pharaoh, because when Young Pharaoh was on the Chitlin circuit, scamming black people and running all kinds of ridiculous game, and people were just eating it up. And I was telling people back, I think in 2000, at least 2015 or early 16, very early, before he ran from the Amon Ra Squad debate, that this cat is not to be trusted. He's saying stuff that he should know isn't true. And what that reminds me, and I'll get into why, is the grift that I see from a lot of right-wing American conservatives. And it's strong. And I'm talking like before all the crazy ass QAnon shit. I'm talking about going on right now. And they have a fierce urgency and entitlement to get people to believe their bullshit. And it's at the very top, like Tucker Carlson, just because of the way the networks are, where there's only one big conservative show. Tucker Carlson is the most popular dude on TV, right? This dude went from saying like 6 months ago, 5 months ago, or whenever George Floyd was murdered, that we don't really know yet how he was killed. That was his first little take. And this is a guy who also said that white supremacy, he didn't think it was a factor. I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember, but he would downplay white supremacy while he had a white supremacist writing for him. He gets caught with a white supremacist writing for him, and we're supposed to be in this cancel culture, and he gives like a half-hearted apology, and not long after that, he's saying he doesn't know how George Floyd was killed, and then he lied, and he said that the coroner said, mentioned all these things that were wrong with him, and we know now that he wasn't killed by police officers, when that was a lie. The coroner said he died by homicide. So he went from saying he doesn't know to police officers didn't kill him. We're in the age of cancel culture. That goes like nobody, okay. That's the powerless dynamic. You got, when you have like Bartiromo and some of the other fools that got booted off, Lou Dobbs, talking about Dominion stole the election, and they didn't have no evidence. Giuliani didn't have no evidence, and Dominion was like, oh, we're just going to sue you since y'all don't have any evidence, and then they end up getting booted off. That's the power of the penny. Dog, will you shut up? I'm trying to do a YouTube video. I don't need your barking ass on this video. That's the power of the penny that we don't have. Because what Bartiromo and Dobbs did is not nearly as bad as Tucker Carlson just straight up lying. Because the coroner said that it was a homicide. And if you were unfortunate enough to see the video, you could see that he was choked to death by a knee on his neck. For whatever medical issues he might have had, he was A-okay until he was choked to death and telling people that he couldn't breathe. He was walking around and talking until he was choked to death. And you see this with conservatives, this fierce entitlement to get people to believe bullshit. You see it with Tomi Lahren. She did the same thing, where she always talks about, if you listen to Tomi Lahren talk about Michael Brown's murder, she always says that hands up, don't shoot was a lie. And hands up, when in reality, she never mentions a white man started Hands Up, Don't Shoot by imitating Michael Brown and then proceeded to say he had his fucking hands up. So how was it a lie? The viscerally recorded, like anonymous recorded witnesses, black and white, because a black dude walks in and says the same thing, started Hands Up, Don't Shoot, based on seeing what happened visually. Nobody had time to pay them. Nobody had time to influence them through the media. They were recorded live reacting to it. But Tommy Lauren, again, has this same urgency to get people to believe their bullshit. You know, and that's what kind of was reminding me of Young Pharaoh. And you see this with, like, because Young Pharaoh was doing it with election fraud. Young Pharaoh kind of, you know, I guess eventually he realized that his game is better off metal than pop, or better off metal than Chitlin Circuit, or whatever the hell, you know, country or whatever the MAGA people listen to, because his next move, once he had scammed black people and all that, his next move was to just start sounding like Diamond and Silk. And just all over Trump, beyond anything I could do as somebody that really didn't vote for Joe Biden, sees him as a crazy right-winger in sheep's clothing and all that. But no fan of Biden. Kamala, you know, I'm a liberal who is to the left of these Democrats that keep winning, even Obama to some extent, because Obama kept moving to the right. But Young Pharaoh would show images of some dude, and you've probably seen this, wasn't him, it was a video of this guy tossing out ballots. And because the dude's black, and black people vote like 88% Democrat, he's calling it election fraud. No evidence at all. You know, this could be a dude that just has agitated mannerisms. And there was another example like that. And that for them is enough. You know, and I ask them, because I don't want people stealing elections. So if you got some evidence, let me see. And what you don't get is evidence, because they have the same entitlement. Even like black conservatives that jump on the train, even before they run the train. In the case of Young Pharaoh, because that's why I'm comparing him to Teenage Dream. Like before he was on the honky hustle, when he was just on the Chitlin Circuit hustling the Negro, you could kind of see he kind of had a lot of that same moxie and entitlement that you get from conservatives. And let me give some more examples. You also see this with abos. Abos, they don't just want to be able to say, Molly got here first. There's some evidence for that. There were some Africans here. You know, Columbus said that. Columbus said there was Africans here before him. They aren't satisfied with that. They aren't satisfied with, let's say, maternal haplogroup X, Y chromosome R, came from Northwest Africa through Europe on an ice bridge, and these people look more like Africans, blah, blah, and they're part of the gene pool. They're not. They want all or nothing. You have to jump on the all or nothing train. And I'm like, and that's why they start coming with these conspiracies when it comes to genetics. And those conspiracies don't work on me at all, because when it comes to population genetics, just since I've had this channel, I've learned enough about it to where I can see right through the abo stuff when they talk about population genetics. Like I can see, oh no, this is bullshit. Now your conspiracy doesn't work because of this. Your conspiracy doesn't work because of this. But they're going for the whole thing, and that's what's different with them. And that's what you also see with like this same brand of racist conservatives. And you're seeing versions of this where it's just basically another version of the alt-right, another version of the KKK, where they have Facebook groups where they're trying to argue that modern Egyptians and ancient Egyptians are the same. And likewise, I can see right through that BS. But it's the same tone of argument that you get this entitlement if you argue against them, especially like me. Like, they invited me to one of the groups thinking that they were going to lead me into a trap. And at first, I'm like, I'm going to play along with this. I'm going to give them like some weak stuff and then see how crazy they get. And then I'm just going to shut it down with stuff like, why is this prosthesis painted the same color as dark-skinned people? And this head dad can pictures. Why are you on this We Was King stuff calling out African Americans for referring to ancient Egyptians as ancestors, which I don't entirely agree or disagree with, but that's a long story. Or just that type of we and African and sharing African with them and noting that they're African culturally. You got an issue with that. But I can show you far more images of ancient Egyptians that look like African Americans, and then the people that are playing them on Hollywood, than Sigourney Weaver. Show me an ancient Egyptian that looks like Sigourney Weaver. I can show you an ancient Egyptian that looks just like, let's see, the lookalikes that I've seen. I put a bunch up. Like, there was this football player with some huge lips that looks just like one of the statues that had some huge lips. Dang, I forget. I think it was Clyde Simmons. Like, this dude looks just like Clyde Simmons. This dude looks like the brother from the Mod Squad. This statue looks like Nicki Minaj. A lot of it ain't coming to me, but or I can say like, this is the same color as Julius Malema, or this statue looks like this Kenyan person. Like, and I could do that all day. All day, all day, all day, all day. But then I can't do that if I tune into any movie set in ancient Egypt, yet these white people are making $100 million. You aren't checking them, but you want to check us. And that's how, that's where I'm breaking it down. Like, here's the hieroglyph for the face of Egypt. So eventually I upped it a level and they booted me out because I was killing them. And their argument, one of the big flaws in their argument is they are going by appearance. So they're like, oh, Berbers, let's try to associate them with Berbers because a lot of Berbers would not be classified as black. But the problem is, if you study Berbers, you realize that doesn't work because Berbers are centralized in North Central Africa. They don't clip into Egypt heavy. And the one tribe that does clip into Egypt, the Siwa Berbers, they are genetically more African than the other Berbers. So it's like, by clipping into Egypt, you became more Central African. But the other Berbers are still African. So even if Egyptians were Berbers, they'd still be African. And if you're an African American, you can still say we. And since African Americans have a little bit of Berber ancestry, it's damn near impossible for an African American not to have a little bit of Berber on an STR test or a GPS test. Maybe not 23andMe, but STR, GPS. And I saw that, like, on this GPS test, which like is supposed to track ancestry more directly than just, all right, people mixed with these people and then went way over here, but that's not your ancestors. Even on them GPS tests, African Americans get more Levant than European. It ain't much. It's like 3% or whatever. So to say, refer to ancient Egyptians as ancestors, I don't really do that just because my ancestry is much more West African than Northeast African, but a portion of it is Northeast African, and enough of that is related to people who say who trace their history to the Nile. And another issue that they have is Egypt's been invaded by everybody. Some people invaded more than once. Even like the British colonized it, and if you look at Anwar Sadat's kids, Anwar Sadat would pass as black in America. Like Lou Gossett played Anwar Sadat in the movie, I believe. I'm not 100, but I'm pretty sure. And there was some controversy. But Anwar Sadat had a wife that was Egyptian. I don't know her ethnicity and all that. And then he married and had children. He had children with both women, but he had children with a white woman who was part of like when they were colonized by the British. And that's a small example of why this modern Egyptian being the same as ancient Egyptian just doesn't work. But there's so many other examples because they've been invaded by Syrians and Persians and Greeks and Romans and Arabs twice and Turkish and colonized by the Brits, the French, invaded by the Sudan as well, invaded by the Levant with the Hyksos. So it doesn't work on a basic logic level. You don't really have to get that deep into it, but that same entitlement to believe bullshit ran. I remember I saw one example of this, something similar to this, on Reddit, where this guy has this long preface about his problem with medieval people of color. Now, Medieval People of Color is a blog that just categories images of people of color, right? In medieval times, medieval Europe onto like early Renaissance and ancient Europe. So it's mostly medieval, but whatever. They got images that go way back. Now, this Reddit article, and I would have responded to it, but it was archived. I've never seen anybody destroy their argument with the preface like I did with that article. He didn't want to sound racist, so he started off about saying, it's supposed to be people of color, but I do see that it's not just black people. So his whole thing was he's trying to say it's too many black people without sounding racist. And he also, in destroying with the preface, he said that, and I'm assuming it's a he said that I understand why he has this, because, a lot of times we don't necessarily see these images and, these lack of representation. And I'm like, I'm reading this. I'm like, I'm about to close this out. Why am I even reading this? Where's your argument? I'm starting to see where he's going, but I'm like, you've destroyed your argument with the preface. He at one point he does make an argument that isn't destroyed by the preface, and it falls flat, because what he said that you see these images of Saint Maurice, and supposedly Saint Maurice might not have actually existed, and I think he had a source for that, and that Saint Maurice was Egyptian, and the Egyptians are different from sub-Saharan Africans. Right there, he destroyed it. If Egyptians are not in sub-Saharan Africa, then obviously they're going to be different in some ways. They've left sub-Saharan Africa for a few thousand years, and they've drifted apart genetically, and not completely, because you might have, Egypt is not far from sub-Saharan Africa. Like, new people will come and all that. So then to say that you can't have Saint Maurice, he can't come from there. Like, that has nothing to do with Saint Maurice, because what he's then doing is he's turning it into a phenotype discussion. And that goes back to what I was saying about Berbers. If only one tribe of Berber clips into Egypt, you can't just automatically say Egyptians are North Africans and they must look like Berbers. No, you can't say that. So phenotype is dead. Like the one argument he had just dies right there. You can't make a phenotype discussion. And the way it also dies is this is primary history. They're talking about this dude and they're naming him and they're saying he's from Egypt. So even if somehow he didn't exist, right? It would have been a fictional story based on what they assume Egyptians look like at the time. Now, not all Egyptians, of course, but enough to where it's not unusual. Nobody's going to say, wait a second, how come he looking like a sub-Saharan African? Egypt isn't, like, that wouldn't go on around the time of early Rome, because he was a Roman who supposedly came from Egypt. Black Roman that came from Egypt. And because he caked for Christianity, he was made a saint. And I guess he martyred himself. I don't know the story much beyond that. And you see images of black people all over Europe from medieval times, and a lot of them are said to be Saint Maurice. And in a sense, he also kills his argument because a lot of them aren't labeled Saint Maurice. So you just have images of a lot of black people. That's really all it is. You know. And then and that's the person that does medieval people of color. He never argues that they were the majority of the population or anything like that. Now, I will say that you see an unusually high amount of black, and I'm saying black because they would be classified as black today in America and countries that have black race, of black Roman knights. A lot of images. I don't know if exactly why. I mean, Italy is near Africa. You've always seen black people in ancient Italian images and all that. So, maybe like some people moved in and set up shop there. An ongoing migration before the Moors. I mean, that always seems somewhat reasonable. But that is not the entirety of Rome. I think you only see a handful of black popes, and most of them look kind of mulatto. So but then if you start to see the pattern, he was prefacing it to not sound racist, so he could run the same division between sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, and that is artificial because nobody is more related to Berbers than Sahel and Horners. Sahel is right on the Sahel is basically the line between North and North Africa and like Central Africa. So it clips into what is called sub-Saharan and North. So, and Sahel Africans is why the phenotype thing doesn't work with Saint Maurice, is a lot of them look just like Saint Maurice, the Saint Maurice images. So it's just not true. Like, there is no big division between North and Sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, that's like anywhere in Africa, but you're still African. And I'll probably do a video, it may take a little while, where I go into how African some of these pale-looking Berbers are when you really trace their genes, their haplogroups, everything, their culture, their language. They're very African, regardless of phenotype. So we're still talking about like the same people. Like, these Berbers are like the Sahrawi are very African people. And they're related to like people from Guinea and the Mundane, the Fulani. They're related to a lot of people who look like Saint Maurice. And there is a cline that crosses into each other where you have people who look like Sahel Africans in very North Africa, in Tunisia, going into Europe. And that's how you end up with these images from medieval people of color. It shouldn't be anything controversial unless it is starting to affect your bullshit entitlement. Why aren't people going along with this bullshit entitlement? I ran into somebody in the, when they had Gal Gadot, or if I'm saying her name right, playing Cleopatra, and somehow we got on the subject of what Greeks look like, and I was arguing like the Greeks to some extent would have been multiracial, and this goes back to the very early Greeks who have had their pigment genes tested and had dark skin. Some of them, and lactose intolerance. So there is a sort of weird cutoff, and that it ain't a weird cutoff. It's the Mediterranean Ocean. Ancient Europeans crossed over from Africa into the Mediterranean Ocean, and a lot of them, from what we know, all damn near all that have been tested, maintain much of their melanin. When they say that somebody has dark skin and blue eyes, it's the prediction's probably off, because it wasn't a bunch of really dark skinned people with blue eyes. It was more like medium brown and brown eyes, like Julius Malina. Some Julius Malina colored people. Because when people like that, not with Julius Malina, because he's more red bone, it might show up that he has red hair when he doesn't, but that's how their predictions error. And I covered that in Black Neanderthals and Eurocentrism way back, and that hasn't really changed. Like, I've seen more recent predictions, and they'll be wrong in that way. But I had to, like, show this dude, because I had told him, that early Greeks were dark skinned, and he's like, well, what Afrocentric craziness did you get that from? Like, that, like I got labeled Afrocentric in a negative way, like it should be a good way, because the Greeks are right next to Africa, and so I had to show him from a Greek source. In this source, there was an English translation of it. It was gone, so I had to hunt this down. Oh man, I hope I saved it, because I'd like to put an example up. But it was a magazine in Greek that I had to translate to English to show them, like, no, the Greeks are saying this. They're saying that the first Greeks were black, as far as their pigment genes were like that of people who are classified as black in Greece today. Okay? But they have this entitlement. I saw this in that before I think I got kicked off. I just don't get any of the alerts for that Facebook group. They show like this example of maybe 8 real images of Egyptians and 4 fake images and a couple that are suspect. And we're like, and they'll look like a bunch of FK Twigs looking women. And you don't really see it that much with the women. And the men kind of look like Blake Griffin, like it's just kind of mixed, you know what I mean? Like, you'll see something of that nature, and I'm like, dude, do you know I can do this with Roman Knights alone, Black Roman Knights? And I'll do that. I'll do that with images from places like medieval people of color, and then when I want to show Egyptians, I can show a collage where you can barely see any image because it's so many of them. But I did that, and but I said, you know what? I'm not going to show a collage of Black Romans. I'm just going to show one statue. And then the person responded, like, where do you get that from? Like, I'm like, I show that it came from a museum. And then their response, and this is one of the reasons I did this video, and I was thinking about doing something like this before Young Bozo was going to speak at CPAC. And the irony, I'll get to why, like, they canceled Young Pharaoh for the one thing that he was saying that was true-ish. I'll get to that. But they responded saying that the museum, your source, like accusing me of like not reading my source, says that he was I think, Ethiopian slave. So I'm like, what? I'm looking at this museum. Now, I disagreed. The museum said that he was like a Black Roman, or no, the museum said that he was an African laborer, which is close to like Ethiopian or slave or whatever. But the museum didn't say he was a slave, and it said he was dressed like a laborer. He was dressed like a laborer. And again, this is a statue, so who's going to make fine artwork of their slaves like that? But and there's no primary of anything. So the source that this person put from the museum was an archive from like 100 years ago, where they were talking about, and I went to the primary, and it was just like some goofy racist stuff, that said, well, since Greeks like to hang around Negro slaves, and this must be a slave. It was really roundabout logic that was in the archives for a reason, and the museum wasn't standing by this. It was, like I said, in the archives. But this was a woman who thought she had a good source, and I'm like, that's the type of entitlement that I see with a lot of these racist conservatives, where they're so sure that a black person is a slave that they don't even look at why the museum doesn't have this up anymore. And here's the thing. Even if the person was a slave, they would still be a Roman. So there's my point. This is a Roman. This is a black Roman. And I can show you far more images of black Romans than you can of anybody that looks like Sigourney Weaver in ancient Egypt, or just white people in general, just straight up white people in ancient Egypt. Good luck. It's just, you look at their artwork and it's image after image after image of brown people with different type of features. So and they can't argue with that. So that's why I don't get their alerts anymore. They're like, oh shit. Their next argument is, oh, we was Romans. Again, the crazy entitlement. I'm not saying we. I'm calling this person, regardless of how they look, a Roman and a European. Where do you see we in this? But that's sort of their default when you hit them with the truth, that here's all these black Roman knights, and they outnumber your images of mulatto-looking or North African Berber-looking Egyptians. So what are we getting at? Because now here's the megalode of Egypt. And then I cross my arms and I lean my head to the side, and that's it. And y'all think I'm bullshitting, dude. I've heard recently somebody, again, right-wing conservatives in America, argue that Herschel Walker was logical. What he was saying at the HR 40 hearing was logical. I'm like, well, how come y'all didn't say Obama was logical when he said the same thing about this not being fair to second-generation immigrants? But how the hell is that logical when immigrants themselves get reparations? Huh? That whole thing about reparations not being fair because of blah, 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 but immigrants have gotten reparations. And the one good thing that HR 40 hearing did was 300 plus Japanese sent in their testimony saying we need to pass reparations. Because the one good thing that the Hucklebucks did was they're like, man, I don't know if we can get reparations for the Negro, but we can do it for the Japanese. So we kind of earned some payback from the Japanese, and they're supporting reparations now for black people. So it kills the Herschel Walker argument. It kills these people that think that Sambo shit is logical. And the only reason why they don't think it's logical, they just have an entitlement to get you to believe that it's logical. They know that by and large, some of them are ignorant and don't know. But a lot of them that are short with you and don't want to debate, they know that that this dude is Samboing up a storm. And they know that he's Samboing in a way that other people don't because of the racial wealth gap and the fear that he's going to be poor again because he didn't handle his NFL money right. So now he's gone on to the same type of hustle as Young Pharaoh. And then let me just end it with that. What Young Pharaoh was canceled for was telling the truth about white supremacy. He was basically, and he didn't do it tactfully, okay? But the one area where this dude told the truth, and not the one. I mean, he said the truth about other things, but I mean, I'll get to some of his BS and why it made them look suspect to even have him. And then for the reason that they canceled him, he was basically saying that the Judaism is a lie, and they have this Judeo-Christian thing with the right wing, like people like Dennis Prager, he's Jewish. Ben Shapiro, like you got a bunch of right-wing Jews, and they fall into that. You can't question Zionism, which is white supremacy by proxy, and a lot of them aren't really religious, so it don't really matter so much if you say, well, look, man, you really believe the Moses story? Slow-mo Sands is spilling it on the Roman expulsion. You don't really have a lot with that. I can go into population genetics and show that Europeans, that Ashkenazi are super European. So when you say that it's based on a lie, Judaism is based on a lie, and they're thieving, it's a black liberation / Hotep style of just saying that Zionism is bad. I mean, that's basically what Young Pharaoh was saying, and that's one of the few things where he's correct. I mean, because this is a dude, like, if you look at his scamming or you look at his top 10, let me go through his top 10 pseudo claims. Aliens are vaporizing people. I'm going in order. I'm just going to scroll through this. There's hidden aliens in the dollar bill. There's a 10 foot, 11-year-old African girl out there, and we need to harness those genes and make a race of giants. Greek is not a spoken language. Let me repeat that. These are real claims. You can look up, I might put a link to the video, and I would say download it because Young Pharaoh has certain protections. He can get that off because that makes him look bad, but it's what he's saying. He was saying that Greek is not a spoken language in relation to the debate that he ran from. He showed a story on an Indian dude who hadn't drank water for 62 years. You can go without eating if you take vitamins, but you can't go without drinking water for no length of time, close to 1 year, close to a month. Your organs will shut down. You can't just live off the sun. But that's how he was lying to black people. The same dude that ran a fundraiser for a daycare and didn't open it, pocketed the money, ran a fundraiser for legal defense, pocketed the money, was selling jewelry with an African logo, like stole a African orphanage's logo to sell fake jewelry. Had a fake ass bank card. I mean, just all kinds of scams on the Chitlin circuit. But CPAC was like, no, don't question white daddy Zionism. We know these Jews are super European that went to Israel and set up shop. We know. Ain't that right, Shapiro? And if you listen, like, they sound the exact same. Like Ben Shapiro and Young Pharaoh both blabber fast to get people to believe bullshit. It's a hustle for both of them. I wouldn't be surprised if Ben Shapiro's dumbass believes it more than Young Pharaoh's dumbass. I mean, he had a video of a giant spider and he was trying to sell it to people and people were buying it. A giant spider crawling over apartment complexes. And when I say giant, I'm not talking about like the size of somebody's foot. I'm talking about the size of a car. He had People jumping over cars, acting like they were superhuman when they had trampolines, and you couldn't see the trampolines, but they had trampolines. He said that there was a 1-billion-year-old black woman on the moon, that there's a 65-million-year-old pyramid in Crimea. Then he had that image of the alien baby in Egypt. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why, this style, his style, just like Teenage Dream, it's better off in a different genre. Because he had that Chitlin circuit, I don't want to keep calling it that, but that conscious circus community type rhetoric about Israel, even though he was basically saying the same thing that a lot of white liberals say, like, I've heard, a lot of white liberals criticize Zionism. Like Michael Brooks, who just passed away. God, he was only 36. Died in July of 2020, man. But Michael Brooks would say the same thing tactfully. It'd be the same thing. That this is an occupation. Jews are stealing. It's the same thing. You call it an occupation. We know they're Jews, but because he said Jews specifically, because it has that black liberation tongue to it, because as someone who calls himself Pharaoh, he knows that Moses' story was an appropriation, that it's a myth at best. Most likely it's an appropriation of the Amos story. Young Pharaoh, for all of his flaws, he knows that. So what you have is a person, because he has enough of that truthfulness from black liberation, because he has enough of that, he has enough of that authenticity, and by proxy of that, he told the truth about white supremacy, an aspect of it, which is Zionism. CPAC canceled him in the face of all of this scams against black people. In the face, he said worse things about Jews. This dude, Young Pharaoh, has praised Hitler. I don't praise Hitler in any context. I'll tell the truth about Zionism. I'll agree with Young Pharaoh there. But they were ignoring that. And I think what happened is, it's always like the stuff that somebody said that's freshest and most popular. And people were pointing fingers at C-SPAN like, this guy's a racist. And most likely it was that dumb breed of liberal that if they would have sat back and were honest, they were like, yo, he's saying the same thing that like Van Jones would say when he supports Palestinians. Like he's speaking what the gospel, because because you're a Christian, do you see this Zionism as some form of righteousness? Because some black Christians are like that. They're like, hey, the Jews should go back. This is their land. It says so in the Bible. So, Young Pharaoh is at least consistent. He has bashed all the Abrahamic religions. It's not just Judaism. So, and he does that to get attention or whatever, but he's at least consistent in that ideology, and that led him to tell the truth, albeit untactfully, about Zionism in Israel and the cultish nature of CPAC. Like if you look at that thing in CPAC recently, the most recent CPAC, if you just look it up, where the woman and a dude, they're trying to tell people to wear masks, and they're like, we should respect private ordinances, and we respect private this and private property and blah. Like you're playing to people's ideology, but you're talking to them like children. That means something's wrong. that means you're dealing with the cult. We don't get mad. Don't tear up the place like you did when Trump lost.